All right, so we are entering one of our last few letters. Dear Philadelphia, as we get going into Revelation 3, the Bible says, "And the angel of the Lord, the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, he who shuts and no one opens." We've talked about the context about Jesus the last few weeks as he's introduced to all the churches. We started out with the stars in his hand, walking amongst the lampstands, basically being a presence amidst the churches. The first and the last, the one who is dead and overcame the grave, the one who understands our circumstance and has overcome. Him who carries a two-edged sword, divides. Eyes of the flame of fire, feet of brass, the feet that basically keep him, while it may seem that he is with us here on earth, he also is separated from. Walks amongst the seven spirits. We talked about the introduction of the Holy Spirit. And this week we see that he opens and shuts, and whose intentions cannot be undone. Now, there's a context here to the church of Philadelphia. This is a very different letter. Philadelphia was located on the road between Sardis and Laodicea. And we already talked about Sardis. Laodicea is probably the most commonly quoted, known, understood, taken out of context letter, which we'll get to next week. But here we have Philadelphia. It sits in the middle. It was located on a fertile river. But Philadelphia was a church not really of much renown at the time. And actually, out of all the churches in the book of Revelation, it's really the one that is not, we consider it famous because we have a Philadelphia. But the reality is, in this case, Philadelphia was not really one of the churches of major renown. It was actually a very small church. And here in this letter, we find a message that's very different than the other churches. And actually has led to a lot of speculation over time as to what the church of Philadelphia really meant. So here we have, in Isaiah 22, we have the servant, Eliakim. Eliakim was the servant that basically, tell me if you've heard this before. In Isaiah 22, verse 22, it says, "I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I will drive him like a peg," which in itself doesn't sound very exciting, but "I will drive him like a peg into a firm place. He will become the seat of honor for the house of his father. All the glory of his family will hang on him, its offsprings and offshoots, all its lesser vessels, from the bowls to the jars." If God is blessing you all the way down to the bowls and the jars, that's a pretty solid blessing, right? When God is blessing your, china, that's legit, right? Right? Most of us are like, just bless my wallet, right? You can be honest, you can feign that that's not true. But the reality is, if he's blessing the stuff in your kitchen, that's not even metaphorical, by the way. Basically dealing with that. So here we have this connection to Jesus. And one of the things that's really important is that Jesus, we have to remember, ultimately is the completion of humanity. And that when it comes to Jesus, what's important to remember is that we see what are called types of Christ throughout the Old Testament, examples of what Jesus ultimately would be, but they all come up short. Jesus does not. And so Jesus really is the completion of that perfection. So it started, the idea started with Eliakim for it to be basically transported into the book of Revelation as a representation of Jesus is not meant to say that Eliakim was as great as Jesus or as important as Jesus. And actually we know that Eliakim ultimately failed. But it's not to say that he is famous, that he is as important as Jesus, or that Jesus is just like him. It's to say that Jesus took what Eliakim was meant to be and completed it. Eliakim, being human, came up short. But for Jesus to be the one who pushes something open and it stays open, it's true. It's also important, it says, "I will drive him like a peg into a firm place." That's important because of what we're going to read later on in the letter with the concept of holding fast. Is that it's important to drive a peg into a firm place or it doesn't do you any good. Right? If you drive a peg into the sand,
it goes flat.
Right, and then you go pull on it, it just falls over. Right? So we want to drive a peg into a firm place. So as we continue to read, it says, "I know your works." God seems to know our works, right? That's pretty clear in all the letters. "See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it, for you have a little strength. Have kept my word, and have not denied my name. So here again we see, I know, right? I know your works. I know what you've done. I know what you're doing. I know what's happening in your life. I know all these things. And then he says, the door now is open for you. The door to heaven, the opportunity for eternity with God is there for you to take if you want it. But you're going to have to basically hold true. You're going to have to hang on. And then he says you have some strength. Now it's easy to read that and think, well, that was he mocking him? You have a little strength? But no, it's not meant to be that at all. He's actually saying, look, you have some resolve. You're doing well. You have some strength. You're not powerless in this situation. You're not basically, your destiny is not out of your control. You've done well, because then he says you kept my word. He says you've kept hold of what I taught you, and you are living it out. And then he says you have not denied my name. You basically haven't turned away from that name. And I think, sometimes we get a little caught up, I think, in that idea of denial. And I think a lot of times we think of Peter, or we think of this. But the reality is, when he's talking about denying my name, he's saying anytime that you basically present yourself as, I'm a follower of Christ, but then don't live like it, that's denial of name. That's basically saying, I'm taking on this title of Christian, I'm taking on this title as follower of Christ, but I'm going to go live as though I'm not. That's denying Christ. Sometimes we think we have to include the name deny. We have to say deny, or I don't know who Jesus is. But the reality is if we basically take on the name of Christ and then we live like we're not, we're denying. And he's saying, look, you have a little strength, you've kept my word, and you haven't denied my name. I mean, that's a huge list of compliments. A tremendous list of compliments given to this church. As we've seen with some of the other churches, not so many compliments. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, there's that synagogue of Satan again, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. So here we have another example of the synagogue of Satan, right? Here it is, the synagogue of Satan, this church of people who are basically lying, who are basically, telling basically falsehoods about who they are. These are the Gentiles. The Gentiles who've taken on the identity of the Jews, and the Gentiles are using their connection with Judaism to avoid persecution. These are people who are completely misrepresenting who they are, and are basically trying to come into the house of God, tell lies, take control, pull people away. He is obviously not happy about that group. But he does make a promise that they're going to worship at your feet. Right? Okay, wait, that's different than all the other churches. God's making promises now. And he says, because you have done all of these things, ultimately those enemies, those members of the house of Satan, will be worshiping me at your feet. Now, it's not a PC thing to say anymore. We're not allowed to say that Christians got a really good deal come eternity, but we really do. Right? We're supposed to sit there and go, no, it's cool. We're all just going to sing Kumbaya eternally, 600 billion of us. But the reality is Jesus makes his promise to them. He says, ultimately, they're going to worship me at your feet. And then he goes on to make another promise. Here he says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. That's a big second promise to the church here. So here the church says, I will keep you from an hour of turmoil. I'm going to keep you from what is going to be difficult and painful and awful. I'm going to keep you from it while I put others through that test. I'm going to keep you from that test. Another big promise. Because remember earlier, the promise was what? Hey, you've done a great job, but you know what? More trials are coming. Congratulations. Here, this is totally different. He's making interesting promises to the church of Philadelphia. Then he says, behold, I'm coming quickly. We know that verse, right? That's a good one. That's old church, right? That's good, good scary stuff. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. So remember earlier we talked about Eliakim. Eliakim was a peg driven into firm ground, so that basically anything attached to Eliakim would be strong. So here we have that same parallel where he says hold fast. To hold fast, a hold fast is actually a thing. A hold fast is something you secure something else to. It holds it. Pretty neat how that works. I like English language sometimes it makes sense. But not all the time. A hold fast is something that you secure something else to. So you have a nice, strong something to attach it to. You got to make sure that a hold fast is worth hanging on to. And so he's saying basically, you hold on to Christ. He says, hold fast, hold on to what you have, which is what you have in Christ, not the cool stuff you have in your garage. He's saying, hold fast to Jesus, hold fast to me. And others may hold on to you. You know, I've been a Christian a long time. And for me, I can think of times in my life where I was holding fast to people. Right? They were the ones that kept me there. As opposed, and I know, it's not cool to say this, but where I might have lost my grip is holding fast to Christ, I was able to hold fast to somebody who was holding fast to Christ. You know, and at that time, that's what helped me navigate those waters in my life. And so Jesus is telling this church, hold fast to what you have. And if there are people in your life you need to hold fast to, that are holding fast to Christ, hang on. They will help you get there. They will help you. And then he says, take a hold and don't let go. You know, this is the letters in Revelation are about resolve. Over and over again, he gets back to resolve with them, and he says, you have to persevere. Perseverance is tough. You know, perseverance takes work. Perseverance is going to push you to your limits. And then he says, you might lose, you don't want to lose the crown that you have. Well, what are crown thieves in our lives? You know, I think as far as Christians, I went backwards here. Crown thieves are simple things to me. Complacency is a crown thief as a Christian. When you get to a point that, I'm good. You know, I don't really have to improve much. I'm doing fine. I go to church more than just Christmas and Easter. So, we have this idea that somehow, we get very complacent. We get to a point to where we're not studying as much. We get to a point to where we're not reading the Word outside of someone reading it to us. We get to a point where our prayer life is really as non-existent as it's ever been. We become very complacent, and we become okay with it. Complacency is a crown thief to a Christian. If you're trying to persevere, the last thing you can ever do is become complacent. Perseverance means you keep fighting forward. It doesn't mean you become comfortable with just, I'm good. No, you want to pull, you want to push, you want to move forward. The next one is inattentiveness. If you take your eyes off your Christian walk, you might turn around one day and figure out you can't find it. I remember Gabe uses the quote from one of his old pastors who said, if you're trying to figure out where God went, you moved.
Right.
Not him. Because we become inattentive. It's amazing how quickly inattentiveness can hurt us as Christians. When we just quit, when we lose sight of the fact it is a work, it's a walk. We work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It is an effort we have to put in. We have to remain in. And that's why it kind of ties it ultimately to a lack of discipline in our lives. Kind of a lack of spiritual discipline to me is kind of like when you're a kid and your parents tell you to clean your room. What do? You push everything in the closet, right? You close the door and go. Nailed it. Mom, Dad, you're welcome. Right? Just don't open the closet. Because if you do, you're going to be buried. Because that's what we do. That's not discipline. That's not genuinely cleaning your spiritual life. If all you do is just shove everything into a box and nobody can see, and you're like, no, okay, yeah, perfect. That's a lack of discipline. Discipline is dealing with things. Discipline is working on things. Premature feelings of finality. I'm a Christian. Bam. It'd be like a marathon runner reaching to stretch out at 100 yards. You got a long way to go, Tiger. No, I signed up for the 100-yard dash. No, you're in a marathon. Stretching out and falling before you actually get to the finish line. But there are a lot of people who just reach a certain point and go, I'm there. I have achieved, level 9 in my multi-level marketing scheme with Jesus. I've achieved level 9, and now I can live off the money of everyone below me. And we missed the point. We have that premature feeling of finality. Like, I've done it, I'm finally done, I made it, I'm good. I remember when I first started as a youth pastor in Texas, I had a guy walk up to me who was a really heavy volunteer in the group at the time. And he said, you know what? I volunteered long enough. I don't need to do it anymore. I'm done. I'm done volunteering in the church. I've been doing it for 20 years. And my first thought was like, but you're just now getting to the age where you actually have something to share. I mean, why do we let the 20-somethings work really hard with the 18-somethings? I mean, no offense to 20-somethings, but really, 60-something has a whole lot more to give. But no, I'm done. I'm too old to be of any value. No, it's a premature feeling of finality. There's always value. There's value in those things. And as Christians, sometimes we get that idea that we've done enough, we've checked the boxes, we've made it, and then finally we fall into the lies that present ease. It is very popular to present ease spiritually now. It is very popular to present to people, you know what? Here's the best way you can live, where everything's going to be good. It's easy. Don't worry about it. You know what? We're going to make the Christian life so tremendously appealing, which is funny, because Jesus does the opposite. When he says, "Why would you want to follow me? I sleep on rocks." Do you really want that? Because he was trying to make it clear that, you know what, this is an effort. This takes energy. It takes time. You put together all those things, and when those things creep in, they begin stealing that crown away from us, that eternality away from us, because we begin to fall for a lot of human lies. That somehow, if we just get to a certain point, we've done enough. The truth is, as Christians, it's every day you're working, from the day you become a Christian to the day you're standing there and Jesus reaches out and gives you a big fist bump. Right? I guess it's probably most of you, but I'm expecting you to do a fist bump. But the idea is that it doesn't stop. And then that's where we have to be careful that we don't fall victim to that kind of thing. Because then he says, right at the very end, he says, "He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, and the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of the heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name." Very clear what's going on there, right? Very clear. The truth is, he says, listen, he who overcomes will be rewarded with a place of honor in eternity. Right? He who overcomes will be rewarded with a place of honor in eternity. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
I think that's, well, Richard already got this. I think that's cool. Don't fall for that. Early finality. He who overcomes will be rewarded with a place of honor in eternity. And that is so awesome, to think that a pillar of the house of God is going to have your name on it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just, that's a bigger deal to me, maybe than some of you. But to me, it's, Marcus asked me today, he's like, why do they name high schools? How do they decide who they name a high school after? That's an honor to have a high school named after you. But the whole thing is who do they name a high school after? And the idea that God would take and put your name on something like that, I mean, that's way cooler than a brick at AT&T Park, right? I mean, even for you Giants fans, that's way cooler than a brick at AT&T Park. That's way cooler than having your name on some little structure or some little statue. Think about having your name, and then having the name of God printed on you and your name printed on the pillar. I mean, that is the old joke about triplicate, right? Fill it out. Jesus is filling out your final reward in triplicate here. Right? I mean, he's like, look, I'm going to put your name, God's name, my name, his name, trust me. I am being excessive to show you a lesson that whatever happens here in the temporary, if you persevere, if you hold fast in the temporal, in this temporary existence we live in, then I'm going to mark you permanent for eternity. If you hold fast right now. That is, like I said, I think sometimes, we're in such a huge saturated imagery society. You know, I remember when Avatar came out, and the people were getting depressed because they would walk out of Avatar and the world wasn't as pretty as the movie. Only in America, though. Nowhere else is that a problem, in case you're curious. But the idea was people were coming out and they were finding that reality wasn't as beautiful. It wasn't as vivid. It wasn't as colorful as the movie. And all of a sudden we lived in this world that seemed so plain Jane compared to the world that Cameron was able to build with his computers. And I think sometimes we get lost because we're in such an imagery saturated environment in the world that sometimes little things like this, maybe we go, you learn the house of God. You know, streets of gold. You know, I totally prefer, I remember the name of the planet wasn't Avatar. But, the whole thing is I think sometimes we get so lost because we're so saturated in imagery. You have to take this idea of if God's going to do it and God's going to build his house, I'm going to guess James Cameron probably has nothing on it. Just the immensity, the amazingness, the depth, the gravity of the entire creation. And for Jesus to say, you will be a permanent part of that. You will be marked for eternity in the name of God. To me, that's you have to really sit back and turn off your TV and think about it. You as an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. We've heard that every week, right? That you have to be listening to something more. Philadelphia, the message to Philly is pretty positive. I don't know if they call it Philly, but we'll call it Philly now. It's positive, right? It's a very positive. This is the one I hope you embrace. This is the positive one. Everybody should go home feeling awesome today, right? You resolve good promises, great things, awesome eternity. Woo-hoo! Doesn't change next week. The church gets promises of reward from Christ, right? I mean, this is Philly nailed it. And what's funny is, out of all the churches the letters go to, it's the most obscure. But they were doing it right. They seem small in numbers, but they're large in obviously long-term impact. So for us, really, it's simple. It's a message stressing the importance of holding on. As Christians, we cannot become complacent. We can't get to a place where we become apathetic toward our Christian walk. We can't become inattentive to our development. We can't become, we can't just distance ourselves from what has to happen. When you coach football, you drill the same thing over and over and over again. And to the point where kids are looking at you going, really? Again? And you're like, well, do it right. You have to drill it over and over again. You can't just learn it in July and go run it in November. You have to drill it every day. But we have so many people who get saved, who come to Christ, who turn their life over to Jesus, who say, I'm a Christian, but then they don't develop ever in the process. They never work. They never practice. They just, they just start, attending potlucks every couple of months, and they, make a lot of good friends, and they have Facebook at church, make a bunch of buddies. But we never really develop spiritual maturity. Well, it takes maturity to hold fast. Immaturity, let's go. One of the hardest things to teach young people in sports is when you're losing, you got to keep fighting. Because they're like, well, we're not going to win anyway. If you don't stop fighting, you keep fighting. That's what builds resolve. That's what builds an understanding of perseverance. And so we have to stress the importance of holding on, holding fast. The work isn't completed until we're ultimately secured with that stamp of Christ on our lives, ultimately secured with his name on us and our name in heaven. So it's a constant work. It's a constant battle. Jesus keeps telling them over and over and over again, you have to persevere. In the end, the enemies of God will sit before the feet of the faithful. Once again, not a PC thing to say. But that's what he said. And sometimes the Bible says stuff that just does not jive real well with what I'm allowed to say as an American. Don't fall victim to the crown thieves of Christianity. I gave you a pretty good list. Obviously, there's way more things you can put on that list, but that's really what gets us is internal motivation ultimately. The only person that can take away your current is you. And I know we like to focus on losing our Christian amendments, which are 1, 2. That's it. But we tend to focus on our Christian amendments. We tend to focus on the things that give us religious freedom. But nothing can take your relationship with Jesus away from you. Nothing can take your place in eternity away from you except freedom. If you persevere, if you hold on to Christ, it doesn't matter what anybody outside of you does. It doesn't matter what your government tells you. It doesn't matter what some terrorist says to you. It doesn't matter what some relative says to you. It doesn't matter what your spouse says to you. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you, does to you, or can inflict upon you. It cannot take away the love of Christ and your relationship with Jesus unless you hand it over. And I think that's been lost recently. It's so much of what I see when people are frustrated about what about this? It's not stopping you from doing anything. If they make Christianity illegal tomorrow, my hope is that 65 million Americans would happily go to prison on Tuesday. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think sometimes we get so convinced that it's what other people do that matters more. And I incur a lot of that throughout the week, especially working with families in our community, is that we've reached a point where people genuinely think that the only way to have anything is for somebody to give it to them. But in Christianity, you have to go, and you have to push, and you have to pull, and you have to persevere. Christ has given you grace. Christ has given you mercy. He's presented to you an opportunity for salvation. And now you have to hold fast. And like I said, it's really a dangerous trap that Christians fall into. I think sometimes when we start to think, you know what? I'm good. And the reality is loving is hard work, right? Loving takes growth, it takes time. Like I said a few months ago, proximity to pain creates sympathy, right? It creates love, creates compassion. The closer you get to people who are hurting, the more compassionate you are for them. The further away you get, it's amazing how much you don't care. So we have to make sure that we're constantly growing and working, and go out and hold fast to what matters. So let's pray and get you all dismissed. Father, we just thank you so much for this morning, and God, I pray that we can hold fast. That like the definition of Eliakim, we can be that peg for somebody driven into a firm place. If we are what they need to hold on to, let us be that. If we need to hold on to them, let them be that for us for right now. But God, ultimately, we want to anchor ourselves to Jesus. And God, may we be like the church of Philadelphia, be a church worthy of your promise, be a church worthy of your compliments, and how we do not deny the word, how we do not, basically turn away from you in anything we do. God, may we honor the church at Philadelphia by the way we live, and try to be an example, just like they were, to our community. We pray those things this week in your name. Amen. Amen. All right, you guys are dismissed.